Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. I am very pleased to start this podcast of our newsletter Cantus. Is a newsletter that you can find at cantus.substack.com that include articles, musical scores, and also podcasts. And this is one of them. And today we are talking about something that is really I think maybe strange for some of you because you don't heard a lot about this composer. And I'm talking about Carlo Gesualdo, Prince of Venosa, that is indeed one of the most famous and also mysterious composers in Renaissance time for several reasons that we will, of course, explain during this podcast. A podcast where I am joined by my friend Jeffrey Levenberg, that is a musicologist and a former musicology professor in Chinese University of Hong Kong, where of course I met him and we will discuss about that. And he is joining us from New York. So thank you very much, Jeffrey, for participating.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Jeffrey, maybe you before we introduce the topic, maybe you want to say something about yourself for our listeners that maybe are not familiar with your work.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Well, as you say, I'm a musicologist and I'm broadly interested in music history, which brought me to Hong Kong, in particular to work on the famed Jesuit missions to China. And I've done some publishing and research on the topic of Chinese and Western relations in music history. But I also have a particular interest in the Renaissance and the music of Carlo Gesualdo in particular. So I'm looking forward to discussing this topic and the broader history of sacred music with you.
Yes, so we call this podcast the Prince of Music, or maybe would be better called the Prince of Musicians, because this is how he was called. But for him, is different, as in the case of Palestrina. Now, Palestrina also was called the Prince of Music, but that was a kind of honorary title. But in the case of Gesualdo, he was really a prince.
Mm.
He was really coming from a noble family, and is one of the very few cases of members of nobility that also became quite important protagonist of the music history.
Yes, that's correct. And to make an even finer distinction, because Gesualdo is commonly known as a prince, a musician, even a murderer in some contexts, but he was fundamentally, as you say, a prince. But what my research, along with many others recently, has been to add an additional qualification, and that is to emphasize that he was first and foremost a Christian prince. That is to say, he was not a prince in the sense of Machiavelli, who would dare separate religion and the state. Gesualdo was born into a family that literally had archbishops, even a soon to be canonized saint. And therefore, when we speak of Gesualdo as the prince of musicians, I would like to underscore, emphasize that he was first and foremost a Christian prince, or as some of my future publications coming out are going to call into question, well, how Christian was he actually?
Yeah, but having said that, we cannot deny that his life was quite tumultuous or adventurous. I don't know how to define it, because indeed he was not only involved in the murder of his first wife, Maria Davalos, but also with his second wife, the life was not so. I mean, so happy it seems, and also he lose his child. So I mean, he has a lot of things that make his life. I have to say, from a Christian point of view, at least questionable.
Ah, yes, and indeed. And that's one question I'd like to ask in my upcoming article, which will be published at Cambridge Press. I asked a question taking as a basis point the common words we use to describe Gesualdo is we call him a murderer oftentimes, but as Annibale Cogliano and some other scholars recently have taken issue with that, saying it's not really correct to speak of him as a murderer because to commit that crime, as we might think of it nowadays, well, it was actually legal according to law then, shocking though it may be. But the question really is by killing his first wife, was Gesualdo actually a Christian? How could a Christian commit such a crime, or as we would nowadays say, a crime of honor, a crime of passion, a delitto d'onore? It seems almost implausible that he could do it. And therefore, there is a really traumatic experience where there's this vacillation and opposition, as it were, between killing somebody as a prince who has the right, almost the divine right, we might say, and somebody who has very deep concerns about about breaking the fifth commandment. Let me ask you a question, if I may.
Well, yes,
Say,
of course.
okay, say for example that you were to, by some unfortunate happenstance, encounter your loved one in an affair with another man. Now, according to law today, you cannot kill them. In Gesualdo's time, you could, so long as you caught them in the action. But just because the law says you could, how would you feel about doing such a thing, killing a family member as a Christian, as the organista at a major church in Roma? How would you feel? Could you bring
Yes,
yourself to do it?
and that is a very interesting question, and we probably have to specify to our listener that Gesualdo killed the wife because she had a lover. So this is the reason of the killing. And if I have to answer, what I can tell you is that of course it's very difficult to judge today things that happen with the mentality of 4 centuries ago, but still we know that for a Christian, killing yes, whatever is the reason, is also something sinful, you may say, but you know that Christian kill when they go to war, and this is true, and in that case is not considered a sin. But killing your own wife, I don't know, because even in the gospel Jesus say that you have not to separate from your wife, only in the case of adultery. So but you say that you can separate, you can kill, you can kill her. So I know, I understand that it's complicated to give an answer, because as I say, it's very difficult to judge. And I know that what you say is true, that for someone in his own position that has also a family tradition burden to carry, he was quite forced to take a strong action if something of that magnitude happened to him. So I'm not judging Gesualdo, but of course, I mean, he's like Caravaggio, no? You know, he still they kill someone. So I mean, it's not all artists were entitled to kill other people, and they. I mean, it's something that make us think.
Indeed, I think that you're explaining it very well because when we have to think about this, our mind is just going back and forth trying to reconcile how somebody could do such a thing when there seems to me to be a real conflict of powers. Um, but what I've come to see differently in Gesualdo's Delitto d'Onore, if we can still call it a so-called honor killing today, is while I was kind of cooped up, locked up in Hong Kong, so to say, while we're dealing with the pandemic, I had a seemingly crazy idea. Gesualdo, as you know, composed a lot of sacred music, responsories for the lessons of Holy Week, and also a lot of Marian devotions, sacred canciones.
Sacre
And when we
canciones.
study his musica sacra, it's natural to inquire how his sacred music fits within the liturgy and how it fits within the broader service of the church. I got this crazy idea. I hope it's not too crazy, but perhaps you and your listeners, readers, and those that adjudicate my publications will, take issue with. I had the idea that we should actually check the liturgical context of the day or the night in which he killed his wife and her lover, and to see what precisely the church was reading in its lessons, what it was singing in terms of its sacred music, what may have been performed that day in Napoli. And the results, if my calculations of the 400 some years ago are correct, are pretty striking because, according to my calculations, Gesualdo killed his wife and her lover on the day in which the church, the Roman church, that is, read one of the few lessons that sanctions or describes and allows a vendetta killing of a princess and her husband. And coincidentally, the musicians at their wedding are slaughtered as well. So it's a very musical lesson. I won't give it away, but one thing that's really troubling me about Gesualdo is how somebody could possibly be so conflicted about killing that they would try to time the killing such that the Christian church might actually justify it, to put them at ease, as it were, to, as you so eloquently put it, to somehow rationalize for them the fact that, yes, they're committing a sin, but it's also one of the exceptions to the commandment, thou shalt not kill. And that's what I'm finding so troubling about Gesualdo.
But also, there is, I think, another side. I mean, I want to, uh, I want to remind with you something that of my past. When I was studying in the Pontifical Institute of Sacred Music, where I follow some courses, I remember that I sing with the choir, and we sing like Palestrina, Victoria, Lasso. I mean, all these very, mainstream Renaissance composers. I mean, you can define them. We didn't see a lot of like the English school, like Bird or Tallis, because we see more the Roman, like the one that I mentioned. But I remember one day someone brought a piece, maybe it was a responsory or I don't know, of Gesualdo da Venosa. And I remember that we all were very surprised, we may say, because it was so different from the other things that we were singing. And in a certain way, it also sound a kind of out of place in the kind of idea we have of Renaissance music. So I think one of the elements that add more interest, if you want to call it, on the character that was Gesualdo was also that his music sound, if you allow me this term, weird. Weird respect the other Renaissance music we are used to listen. Don't you feel that is also maybe this one of the reason that also why also other composer like I don't know, Stravinsky, for example, became interested in Gesualdo or other.
Oh, absolutely. I think you put it very well. And I would invite your listeners who perhaps, if they have not heard the music of Gesualdo before, to just give it a try online because that first impression is so astonishing. I remember the first time my teachers at the conservatory introduced me to Gesualdo's music and the infamous story of his life and works. And you're absolutely right. It not only just sounds weird, it actually, just makes your jaw drop or your face kind of, squinch together at the sheer sound and morbidity of his music. And it's something that speaks to us to this very day. And I guess that's what makes it so fascinating that it's able to continue to make that impression, even though this is, now 400 some years later, long after Wagner, long after Schoenberg, long after Varese, et cetera, et cetera. And it just has that amazing impact on us. But we cannot forget at the same time that there is a possibility that no matter how weird his music may sound to us, it's possible that it is still part of the tradition. Gesualdo, after all, by some accounts and theories, studied with Giovanni da Macqua, who was trained in the Roman Palestrinian style,
Yes,
and it's
some other
possible he's
people,
very traditional.
some other people say that he studied with also with Pomponio Nenna.
Ah, yes,
That is
possible.
another popular composer, and certainly, of course, he was a skilled composer, but it's only that his music sound so out of the context of the other Renaissance music. When I sing it, I remember because I didn't sing a lot of his music, I have to say frankly, but when I sing his music, me and the other, we have all the same impression. I mean, there were this chord that you don't expect to hear in a Renaissance piece, and also I have maybe it's my thought, and maybe you can disagree with me, but for example, one of his most famous sacred sacred collection are the responsories for the Holy Week, no? And of course, we know that the text for the responsories are so dense and so rich of drama. We may say really drama, a religious drama. No, he talks about the tenebre fatte sunt. No, I mean all these texts. So I think that probably Gesualdo have chosen to put in music these pieces because this text because match very well with his own musical temperament. I don't know what if you agree with me.
Oh, yes, indeed. I think the idea of referring to his music not so much as simply sacred music, but indeed a liturgical drama is a very apt way of putting it, but also something that's got a very long tradition going back even to the medieval period. But it is true, as you say, to just try to sing Gesualdo's music for the first time, it's almost impossibly difficult because there's always a twist or a turn, an unexpected corner. And it really makes me wonder who exactly was able to sing this in his time. And it's one of the mysteries we still do not know. The context it was sung in, it was probably for the Cappuccini church in Gesualdo, but we don't know much about the performers, how they rehearsed, and if indeed that difficulty, the strangeness, is about expressing the pathos, the drama of the Holy Week liturgy. So I do think that's a very good point you bring up.
Yes, and also uh, uh, some people say that even if he was quite respected also from some other composer at this time. The real Gesualdo Renaissance was probably in the past century, where many more scholars start to study him. And as I mentioned before, also composers as Stravinsky made composition in his honor. And and some people think that he was a sort of the anticipation of the the modern music, or things like that, but that I don't know how much is accurate to say like that, because is a little troublesome. But respect the scholarship in the 20th century. In this 21st century, what do you think is the place of the music of Gesualdo? What, do you think that is still very regarded, or you think that maybe is I don't know, not so studied as before?
Oh, well, you raised a host of issues there, and I have many answers. Let me try to work backwards first, because you asked firstly about Gesualdo's Renaissance, and which is a long story, and then you asked also as well, what does he mean to this day? I've thought a lot about that because the study of Renaissance music is ever changing. Under the current context, as you and I know very well, we need to do much better about incorporating non Western, a non Eurocentric approach to the study of music history. And therefore, Gesualdo now actually needs to find a place in China, in Hong Kong, in Macau, and there his reception will be vastly different from how it is in Italia, in America. And we have to tell the story differently, maybe connecting Gesualdo's story to Chinese history now so that he can enter into a country whose population adores Western classical music, was cut off from it for a period, but knows actually very little about Palestrina and Gesualdo, in part because they observe a different religious practice, and the place of religion, as you know much better than me, has a different religion has a different relationship to the state than it
Yeah, of
does
course.
in
In our
Rome.
countries.
And yep, so we have to take that into account too when we tell Gesualdo's story. But what I fundamentally hope to raise in one of my upcoming articles, in telling Gesualdo's honor killing from a Christian perspective, we also need to tell the story bearing in mind that this heinous practice continues to this day. So anytime we talk about Gesualdo and his story about that awful killing and his crazy sounding music, we need to do it in such a way that we are trying to discourage and change the practice where some of the religions in the world to this day still condone, still allow the killing of one's wife and with people caught in an affair. So we have to tell it such that we're actually almost becoming activists, as it were, to try to put an end to this. So I'm trying to reach out to some people that specialize in what we call domestic violence or family violence, and thinking how we can stage this story again in a new way to try to prevent these things from happening.
But if you allow me, I just want to make a little comment on this, because I think it's important. Of course, I also condemn people that kill wife or husband, or whatever, or domestic violence. Of course, this is horrible. But we should, because I think there are some people that make confusion. We should not think that honor, because before you call delitto d'onore, no, in Italian, so honor killing. But we should not think that honor is a bad thing, because indeed the honor is a good thing.
Mm.
What Gesualdo did, and other many other people after, before Gesualdo, did is to kill someone to preserve the honor. And of course, we know that it's wrong to kill someone, but it's not wrong to care about your honor, because the honor is something important. So I think this is important to understand. Also, a little to, I mean, to not to condone, but to justify what Gesualdo did. That Gesualdo did not kill the wife for fun, but because for, as you said before, for the rule of his time, that was necessary to preserve the honor. So in that sense, of course, as you say, there is a sort of I'm sure that you will deal with this in your article. Now there is this sort of struggle between your one Christian belief, but also some value that are considered important, and especially if you are a prince. I mean, a prince in his time was not a prince today. And I think, I'm sorry if I say this, but I think that for a European, is probably easier to understand this than for an American, because you don't have like this kind of nobility. So you don't know what is a count or prince. I mean, but you never live. I mean, I also I not only live, but I meet some of them. But of course, you meet them now. They get their title, but just that. But before, they were the leadership. They were the people that have power, money, that they decide life and death. So it was very different to be a prince in the time of Gesualdo that being a prince today.
Oh, yes, I think you put this very well. And it's something I have trouble not only understanding, but even just working through coming to Italia as an American who is interested, but as you say, from a very different culture, even though we have roots and we have Italian immigrants that have been here since, the 1800s. And there is just this big difference. It is not a coincidence that in the literature written in English, whether in the country England or America and Canada, etc., that nobody recognized Gesualdo's murder, in quotation marks, as an honor killing. Indeed, that distinction had to be made by Italian scholars, and even to this day, it's not very clear in English writing. We still see people referring to Gesualdo as a murderer, saying, oh, that's a crime. Well, Italian law was very different. Even to the 1980s, you were allowed to, with a lesser punishment, kill to maintain one's honor. But
Yes,
so it's very clear now, thanks to many of the Italian scholars, that this distinction in honor and nobility is different from our modern conception of it, and indeed our modern Western conception across the Atlantic Ocean. But at the same time, I agree with you that Gesualdo was not only maintaining his honor, he needed to. He was almost, shall we say, required by the code of honor of his time to kill his wife. There was no question about it, only a Christian concern, because there was very many theological debates
of course,
about the
of
problems with
course,
this.
yes.
And that's the dilemma that I'm afraid we will have to wrestle and debate just as
Yes,
he had to in his mind.
but also we need to consider that if the wife was unfaithful, it means that the heir can be not his real sons. So that for a noble family, it means that have many properties and things. So there were many things involved. So I'm not justifying this world, but I just want the people to understand that what he did, that of course we find reproachable today with our own mentality, and I agree with you, but in his own time was something that was justifiable under many circumstances and point of view. So to conclude our pleasant talk, I want to ask you. You mentioned about an article you are writing. So can you just tell us if you have already an idea where this article will be published, when will be published, for what kind of magazine, journal? Can you tell us?
Sure. The next one coming out will be on this topic, and it will be with the Journal of the Royal Musical Association, which
Okay.
is in Cambridge Press in England. Again, I chose to submit it there in part because they're slightly better connected to this history than if I were to say submit it to the American Musicological Journal. So I want to make sure it's positioned there. And I think it should be published within this next coming year. But you know, with these COVID and everybody is so overworked, it may take another year or even two. Academic publishing is very slow. But I would encourage anyone listening, if they'd like to discuss this or perhaps read some excerpts, take issue in advance. They're always welcome to contact me over email as people do share their work in advance of publication, in accordance with the rules, of course. But that will be with the RMA Society's journal in the next coming year.
Okay, so thank you. We of course are looking forward to know what are your findings about this very peculiar composer that I hope with our discussion we were able to raise some interest in our listeners, because indeed is very interesting. And as Jeffrey suggests, today with the YouTube, you can just go there and write the name Carlo Gesualdo, Prince of Venosa, and you will really be very surprised to hear something that probably is not what you expect from Renaissance music, but still very interesting. So I hope you will have the occasion. So I want to thank Jeffrey for his time and for sharing with me and with our listeners his own studies about Gesualdo. And of course, I look forward to have him in one of our next podcast. And I thanks also everyone that will listen to this podcast. I want to remind you that if you want more content or also exclusive content, you can go and sign our newsletter that is Cantus, Cantus dot substack.com, and there you will have also articles, and you will have scores, and there are two plans, or indeed three plans. Founding members that pay, I think, $210 per year, and they get everything. And then we have the paying member, and now there is a special offer. It's 10% discounted, so please go there. And but there is also place for free subscribers. So I hope to see every one of you there, and thank you, Jeffrey, for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to everyone, and bye bye.